Good morning, everybody. It's 11:34, so and the flurry of people joining has simmered down a little bit. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Jennifer Boyd. I'm a co-director of the West Virginia Practice-Based Research Network, and I'm really glad to see all of you here. I hope and trust that you and your families are safe and healthy. Thanks for taking time to join our virtual retreat today. I always like to remind people, even though we've all gotten probably very used to virtual platforms at this point, that it's wonderful to see people's faces. So if you have a camera and you feel comfortable, I would invite you to activate your camera. It just makes it so much more intimate. And conversely, it's helpful if you keep yourself muted unless you're ready to speak, so that way we don't get as much background noise. So thank you for joining us today. And if one of my partners can bring up our slides, we're really happy to be having an event. We miss being on the boat at Stonewall Resort and seeing each other in person, but I'm happy to be able to get together in this fashion. Let me maximize my slides. So our agenda today, we're pretty excited about. If you can advance to the next slide, Tracy or Jen. We're going to start over the next few minutes with an update, kind of the state of the network. And I know that we have some people on the call who are new to the network, and then to give everybody else an update, because it has been a year and a half since we were together at the previous retreat, and things have just been chugging along. If anything, I think the pandemic has increased the work at the CTSI and the PBRN, and in some ways, in a strange way, that's been exciting. And then if you can just stay on the agenda for 1 second. The other thing I just wanted to say is that we are really excited about the 12 to 1 o'clock panel today, where we have panelists who represent the American Journal of Public Health, the Journal of Rural Health, and the West Virginia State Medical Journal, to be talking to us about publishing and tips on getting our work published. I really see this as an evolution of the network, to be in a point where we're talking more concretely about dissemination and publication. Okay, next slide, thank you. And a reminder that there will be 30 minutes after the panelists for people who are interested in discussing their particular project and getting some one-on-one feedback. So please consider staying for that. We wanted to show you the map indicating the current membership, and you can see that we have a good distribution throughout the state of clinical sites, and these have actually continued to increase over the past year and a half. There's also, you can see the representation of different types of centers, clinics, and practices that are part of the network and active in the projects that we're conducting. You could go to the next slide, please. Here we have our administrative team, and for those of you who are new to the network, you can see Bill and I as the co-directors, and then Stacy Wanger, who's critical to us, as our assistant director. I'm also really pleased to introduce to all of you Jen Lucas and Tracy Sun, who joined us actually about a year ago as our coordinators. They have really enhanced our capacity within the PBRN and really allowed us to expand on some things that have been in the wings, and to feel more comfortable in launching projects that have come up since they've joined. They're just excellent people who I hope you'll get to know. They have a lot of energy and organizational skills. They also both bring excellent writing skills to our team, which is an advantage. And I've appreciated their insight into the studies that are either being conducted or being proposed, and their innovative contributions to the what we call what Bill fondly calls the infrastructure, our project, our support services within the PBRN. So welcome to Jen and Tracy, and I'm sure you'll be getting to know them over the next year if you haven't already met them. The next slide, please. So I wanted to show you this organizational chart, especially for people, again, who are new to the CTSI or the PBRN. And you can see here that the PBRN is a division of the Community Engagement and Outreach Core, which is a core of the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute. Another big piece of news, and both of our core co-directors are on the call today, is that we continue to have Stephanie Kennedy Ray as one of our CEO cores, and we welcome Bree Shepard, who joined the core in the past several months. Okay, next slide. I'm always really grateful to our two standing committees and their members who dedicate their time to helping advise the network. Here you can see the members of the steering committee, and you can see some of them in the photo. The photo's from a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago. You know, the steering committee is a really active and engaged committee, and I just so appreciate the input that we get from the membership. In fact, today's session we owe directly to input and work from our steering committee in thinking about our steering committee who proposed and then helped us bring together this piece on publication. So my hat is off to the steering committee. And then next is our protocol review committee. Again, you can see the various members who participate in our protocol reviews. And what this entails, just for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is that the project applications that come in to the PBRN go through a review process that entails 3 members of the protocol review committee looking at an application and commenting and giving feedback on the completeness of the application, but also the feasibility of the proposed study, the pertinence to primary care, and the impact that it would have on our primary care settings. And this is another critical piece in helping keep the direction of the network on track. They give feedback and approve projects to proceed or give feedback on what more may be needed. For each member of the committee, in case anybody's interested in the future in joining the committee, it's probably between 2 and 5 projects per year that they review. And it's critical, as I've said, to the work. So hat tip and applause for our protocol review committee. Thank you so much for your dedication. I really appreciate it. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Bill, and he's going to talk about what's coming up. And I just think that there's a lot of exciting evolution in both the projects that we're doing and in what we've established in the support that we're providing. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Can everybody hear me?
Yes. It's not coming through real good.
Go out. Thumbs up, Jen. All right. Okay.
There we go.
Is that better?
Better, thank you.
Okay. Okay. That's what I want. Other co-director. Thank you, Jen, for leading into that. And I get the what a year portion of all this with COVID and everything. So, you know, of course, everything changed for us as well as the world this year. We canceled our retreat, grant applications, and most overhaul switched more towards COVID-19 and where we had been previously. The moving everything to telemedicine was actually fairly seamless for us. We've been using Zoom since the inception of the PBRN, so I really feel like we were well ahead on that one. And then all the research projects were held up for a year. But despite that, we still had
Bill, your connection is
go to the
spotty.
next one. I'm spotted.
We can keep trying.
You could
How
try
about now?
turning your video off to see if it might help.
How about now? I just go with a speaker. Can you hear me?
It's still somewhat slow, and Tracy suggested maybe try turning your video off, your camera.
Okay. I will. How about now?
Sounds good so far.
Okay. Well, I will just hold it up here. So, yeah, our cells sometimes gets spotty, and I am on Wi-Fi, so I don't know what's going on. But but despite all the challenges from COVID, we still had a great deal of success. We added 13 new sites. As Jen said, we're now over 100 sites within the network. We've had 19 grant submissions, 9 of which were awarded with over $6 million in funding, and we're really excited about that. We've had 9 submissions to our core survey this year, with 3 of them being selected, and we added 1 on the COVID response. Go ahead with the next slide. Additional highlights from the network. As a whole, we've had 3 oral presentations at the NAPCRAG PBRN conference over the past 2 years and had a poster presented there. We additionally had a presentation at the Southeast Regional IDEA Conference. We've now reached 20 total publications from the PBRN. Our design studio, we've had 7 sessions in total, and additional organizations within West Virginia have been modeling themselves after that. Our partner have 9 topics that people are participating in. And the PBRN as a whole is now a requirement for upcoming NIH CTR grants for the next round. And part of that was our PBRN's impact and influence we've been having. The leadership at NIH felt that was going to be important for all CTRs to add that in, and that's now a requirement, and within that going forward. So overall, you can see we've completed over 55 projects and have 48 ongoing. And additionally, Stacy and everyone has assisted on 72 projects with just consultation to help them get off the ground. We've had a lot of policy changes and practice changes. This is one of the areas we're going to continue to try to monitor and really assess the impact of all the projects that we've had over time, which is one of the more novel things that we do as a PBRN and isn't always tracked across different projects in different groups. Next slide. All right, the core survey, we'll give a quick update on that. We created this in 2018, and our primary goal was to cut down on the number of surveys we asked our members to complete. Our secondary goal was to get people good pilot data and hopefully get more presentations and publications coming out of it. We get submissions from researchers in mid-January. We released the survey to our members in March and closed it in May. Next slide. And you can see over the past year and a half, we've been highly successful with our results from these. We've grown to we had 114 responses this year, which has grown up from 40 the first year. We've had abstracts accepted at the Heart Association, West Virginia Family Physicians Conference. We've had our first manuscript accepted to the West Virginia Medical Journal. We've had presentations at NAPCRAG from this. Just really excited that the results are actually getting out and being used and disseminated and getting out into public, and hopefully will lead to more grants in the future and be able to move forward. Next slide. Design Studio is another one of our big innovations and projects that we have ongoing with the PBRN. We combine this with a CR Deb core, and Dr. Tom Halsey has been instrumental. It's an interactive session where we provide some training in basic research design and then break down specific projects on how to move forward with them and how to advance them and give them more scientific rigor. So far in the 7 sessions, we've had 55 community clinicians and administrators attend the services. One of these projects then led to getting accepted into the core survey. We've had 2 grants submitted off of these, 3 publications, and then we've got 2 manuscripts developed off of the input we've got from the design studio. We also had a really good one recently on critical access hospitals, and hopefully we'll be able to develop a good working group from that moving forward. Next slide. In dissemination, we've continued with our social media accounts, quarterly newsletters, and the water cooler. So if interested or not already signed up, we are on Facebook and Twitter. I don't know if anybody really wants to be checking Facebook or Twitter after the past week, but it's out there if anybody wants to look at something different. And we provide summary reports on some of our projects as they've been completed. Next. And this is really important to me. We, at our annual retreat, normally every year to 2, really like to survey our membership and make sure we're checking in on what's important to them and what they want to see going forward and where the research is. So from our last round, this is a reflection of what was important to our membership and then a percentage of our projects that target these areas. And as you can see from all of them, we at least have some projects going on in it. We've added COVID-19, even though that wasn't important the last time we all got together. I kind of feel like it is now and is okay to direct some resources towards that one. So I really feel like we're doing a good job of meeting our members' needs, and it's really important, especially to Jen and I, that we continue to do that. So if anybody has something or concerns or directions, please reach out to us. All right, next slide. Be quick with our future directions. The West Virginia CTSI grant is up for renewal in September of next year. Again, there's a PBRN focus within the community, the CEO core. We were recently funded for a COVID-19 testing grant through NIH, so we'll be reaching out to those of you who've asked to participate in that. And our PCORI grant, which was put on hold with the Appalachian Mind Health Initiative, we're moving forward with it now, and the sites are getting up and running and recruiting patients. Next slide. All right, so we're going to take just a couple of minutes here before we get our panel discussion started.
All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So welcome back again. This is the second session of our West Virginia Practice-Based Research Network annual retreat, which we would normally be in person, but we're very glad that everybody is able to join virtually. I just wanted to kind of throw out a couple of housekeeping things before this session. First of all, we are going to be keeping the recording for this session. So if you want to refer back, we'll have that available online soon. And also we had some questions for the panelists that were submitted earlier, and we'll be starting the discussions with those points. But if there's other questions that come up, please feel free to just send the questions in the chat, and our moderator will be looking through those and adding those in as we go. So please feel free to add additional questions if necessary. And so we're going to go ahead and get started here. Our facilitator was originally scheduled to be Dreama Mace, Dr. Dreama Mace from the School of Osteopathic Medicine. And I'm hoping that she'll be able to jump on here and join us as well, because this idea really stemmed from information that she had and some ideas that she really wanted to have on the retreat agenda for this year. So if she's able to join, we'll definitely introduce her. Filling in right now is going to be Courtney Hereford. Courtney is the Assistant Director and Research Coordinator for the Center for Rural and Community Health at the School of Osteopathic Medicine in Lewisburg. She also serves as the Site Coordinator for the West Virginia Clinical and Translational Science Institute as part of our Community Engagement and Outreach course. So we're thrilled to have Courtney. She is a great community leader and researcher out in the community and does amazing work with the Greenbrier County Health Alliance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney, and she will be introducing our panelists as well.
Great, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Hey folks, thank you for joining us. We have, as you know, an extraordinary group of presenters here with us today for a publication panel. As Stacy mentioned, I am Dr. Mace's lesser half here at the Center for Rural and Community Health, and I work closely with CTSI and the PBRN, and I'm really happy to be here. So I'll go ahead and introduce this phenomenal lineup. We have Dr. Alfredo Marabia, MD and PhD, and the Editor-in-Chief of the American Journal of Public Health. We have Dr. Linda Yield, MD and Managing Editor of the West Virginia Medical Journal, and Holly Andrilla, who is the editor for the Journal of Rural Health. So we cannot thank you all enough for sharing your time and extraordinary expertise with us today. We're so looking forward to a stimulating discussion. As Stacy mentioned, I believe each speaker is going to speak to us for about 5 minutes, and we'll take questions at the end. So please, enter those in the chat box as they come up. So firstly, we have Holly Andrilla. She is a biostatistician and the Deputy Director of the WAMI Rural Health Research Center, located in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Washington in Seattle. She currently serves as a member of the editorial board for the Journal of Rural Health. Ms. Andrilla is a national expert on workforce trained to provide medication treatment of opioid use disorder, an expert in managing large data sets, designing, performing, and interpreting complex statistical analyses, and conducting survey research. Ms. Andrilla has directed surveys of healthcare professionals and facilities, including a national survey of federally funded health centers and a national survey of family practice residencies. Holly, do you want to go ahead and get started?
I do. Thank you, Courtney. Can I go ahead and share my screen? Do I
Yeah, you
have-
should be
okay.
able to.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
So thank you, Courtney. I am from the WWAMI Rural Health Research Center, and I am not the editor of the Journal of Rural Health. I just want to clarify that. Actually, the editor is Ty Borders, who is the director of one of our sister centers in Kentucky. But I do serve on the editorial board, and I am happy to share our perspectives. And actually, I talked to Ty about this presentation. And so you'll see kind of a mix in my slides, some from the Journal of Rural Health and some from the WWAMI Rural Health Research Center. And the first thing I just wanted to say, speaking from the perspective of the Journal of Rural Health, is what kinds of research would be relevant if you were considering submitting a paper to be considered for publication. And it would be research that was conducted in a rural area or among rural residents that looks at rural urban differences in a number of topics. It could be treatment differences, outcome differences, anything where we see those, we can show those disparities for rural populations. And then also research that was conducted in a rural area that had a clear application to rural areas. And then I thought I would just go through, I have about 8 slides that would just give you some tips on publication, both from my own personal experience and then from the perspective of the Journal of Rural Health. I do work in the Department of Family Medicine. I also work with the Washington-based Practice Research Network. And one of the things I do is coach early career faculty on how to get some of their publications through. So I'm going to tell you kind of the same things that I tell them, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have after everyone's had a chance to speak. And when I'm talking to people about considering publishing something, when I myself am going to try and get something published, I always choose the journal that I'm going to target first. And I do that by considering journals that I read and know the content about, and what the findings are that I want to share, and who would find that research useful, and what does it add to the literature that's new? And that will help guide you, especially who would find it useful, to where you might publish your paper. I think it's important to write a good abstract. For a lot of people, that'll be the only thing they read, or the thing that is the hook that gets them to consider it further. And so it should be a good standalone summary of your main points. Each journal will have their own rules about that. And I'll talk about that in a minute. For the Journal of Rural Health, so I'm kind of switching back and forth here. But for wherever you're publishing, look at what their publication options are. And so for the Journal of Rural Health, there are 5 different kinds of papers that you can submit: an original research article. And I just put in parentheses the different criteria, so you could see that when you were trying to decide where to publish, you could say, well, where does my work fit? So that's 4,500 word maximum. It doesn't mean you have to write something that long, but that's the maximum, and that's a long paper. And then a brief report has a 2,000 word limit and a 3 tables or figure maximum. So if you have more than 3 tables or figures, you're not going to want to try and submit a brief report. And then a literature review, a commentary, and letters to the editor. And all of those are described fully on the webpage of the journal. And that's the next thing that I would say is really important when you are submitting a paper, and that's that you read the author instructions. And that sounds so basic, but so many people don't do that. And then their submission doesn't meet the criteria, and they may be rejected for reasons that have nothing to do with the content. So the author instructions will give you information about how you should cite things, what the style guidelines are, what your cover letter should include. And what I have for my cover letter is I have a cover letter that was a sort of successful one, and I just modify it every time. I don't spend a ton of time on that. But I think the main point that you're trying to say there is, why does this work matter? And so you would address that to the editor, and then that helps them consider whether to have your paper reviewed. Make sure you follow the abstract requirements. So it will have a word limit typically, and the different subsections that you need to have. It may include information about funding disclosure requirements, IRB requirements, and title page instructions. A lot of journals, when you are having a paper blindly reviewed, don't want any reference to your institution or where you're from in the anywhere identifiable in your paper. So all that will be included in the instructions for authors, which will be found on the webpage. So that's where I would recommend you always start. For the Journal of Rural Health, this is the process that you would expect to go through to have your paper published. So you would submit the paper, and then the editorial office would read that cover letter and your abstract and decide, is this something we're even interested in? And you can see if they are, then they would invite reviewers. The reviewers would submit their comments. Based on those reviewer critiques, the editor would decide either to reject or recommend a revision. Your goal when you submit a paper should not be to get it accepted, because I've published dozens and dozens of papers. I have never had a paper. I don't know anybody that's had a paper accepted. There's always some little picky revision. It might be a really minor revision, but what you're going for is a revise and resubmit. And so then you would move up into this second column, and the editor you would submit a revision and the editor would review that. You might even get asked to revise it again. And eventually you'll get to the place where the editor accepts or rejects it. And then it goes through this last column is kind of the workings of the Journal of Rural Health. The managing editor edits it and sends it to the publisher. And there's some proof, some process where you have to approve proofs and so forth. But that's the general process for the Journal of Rural Health. So I think I already said after submission, expect to revise your paper. My most recent publication, I did have to revise twice, and it was kind of annoying. The second time it was a very small thing, but you do have to do that. Sometimes you'll get told, oh, we really like your paper, but we don't want it to be original research. We'd like it to be a brief report. Could you cut this 2,700 words down to 1,900 or something like that? So be prepared to change your paper. And then when you get your revision, when you get your comments back, if they ask you to revise and resubmit, address every comment made by the reviewer. And the way I do this, and I prefer this both as a reviewer and as an author, and I have reviewed hundreds of papers. I like a table format. I make a 2-column table. On the left-hand column, I put the reviewer's comment. In the right-hand column, I write my revision. I write my response, and make it clear for the reviewer, because they will likely be the same people re-reviewing where you have made the changes. And you don't have to do everything that the reviewer says. You just have to justify why you're not doing it if you're in fact saying no, what you're suggesting is not reasonable. And then finally, I would say if you get rejected at the end of it, don't take it as some personal failure or even some personal commentary on you. There's lots of reasons that papers get rejected. It may be that they don't think it's a good fit for their journal. It may be the space that's available in the upcoming issue. It may have something to do with other papers that are being published at that time. So don't give up on your paper. Find another place to submit it. And then I would say to use the critiques of the reviewers to make your paper better. So even if they reject it, you can still use those comments to clarify it for your next submission. So that's kind of what I had to say about publications. And I think it's kind of a thrill to if you haven't published a paper, to shepherd it through and see it printed at the end. So I'd encourage you to really give it a try.
Holly, thank you so much. That was the most succinct, helpful 5 minutes I've had in a while. Thank you for that. So next, we will have Dr. Linda Yield, who is a professor of medical education and pediatrics at the WVU School of Medicine in Morgantown, where she's also Associate Dean for Admissions for the MD degree and the co-director of the Pediatrics Residency Rural Scholars Program at WVU, among many prominent roles. So in July, Dr. Yield assumed the position of editor-in-chief for the West Virginia Medical Journal, the Journal of the State Medical Association. She has been an active reviewer for numerous medical journals at the national level and the author of several medical articles and book chapters in medical textbooks, including a lead author of the Residency Program Director's Handbook, 3rd edition, which of course is a well-known resource for residency program directors. Dr. Yield, the floor is yours.
Hi, hello everyone. I noticed some people that I know, and it looks like it's a great group just from the few people that I see. Hi, Bree, I see you, and nice to see you guys. So thank you so much for having me. So yes, I took over as the editor of the West Virginia Medical Journal. Wasn't quite sure the hefty load I was taking on, but anyways, it's actually very, very enjoyable. As an MD, I don't think you're supposed to admit this. I enjoy writing now more than I enjoy seeing patients. So I am enjoying the role. So I don't have any slides, and I decided not to because Holly told me what she was going to share, and very, very similar comments. The big thing I'm going to say is to submit to the West Virginia Medical Journal. One has to meticulously follow exactly what the manuscript guidelines say. You can punch in type in to Google West Virginia Medical Journal manuscript guidelines. We come up with this one page that has 3 columns for original research, which it sounds like what you would be going ahead and submitting for, or a review article with specific guidelines on how to do a review article or a case report. Those are the only 3 types of articles that we are accepting. A large part of the journal is what I call non-scientific right now, where it's information that each of the medical schools in the state supply. The president of the West Virginia State Medical Association has his own feature in there, and just some paid material just to keep it in a print version. So my goal is to get the journal back so that it is actually indexed by the National Library of Medicine. It had been originally, and then like before there even was any major process to get something to be able to be indexed on PubMed. They were, quote, grandfathered in, but that went away. And it's a pretty hefty process to get a journal to be indexed on PubMed. And so I'll have to have years under my belt in this position before I start applying for that, because you have to prove the number of acceptances you have, that you have a very strong peer review process. And so we are very much cracking down on being very strict with submission guidelines, and that desk rejections are happening probably more than they ever have. And it's simply, often it is due to not following what the guidelines are asking for. Everything in the guidelines are there for a reason. Like we even have to have in your cover letter now to say that you've put it through a plagiarism checker. Some journals require that. And I think that's a fantastic idea. I know ones that I've submitted to other journals myself, I've had to do that. And but anyways, my advice is follow the guidelines exactly. They're there for a reason. And I am always easy to contact through my email address at, and that can be shared with the group. Happy to guide someone, but we have expanded the peer review process tremendously because the journal, there was a little bit of a transition issue because of a new managing editor and a new editor. And there were about 60 manuscripts we had to address. And now we're probably down to less than 5 and new ones, which is a huge feat in the 5 months. But anyway, so follow manuscript guidelines. And if you go to the West Virginia Medical Journal, there's also a link within the guidelines of a novice author guide that I had written with the 7 steps to publish in the clinical literature. And maybe you will find that helpful. And just like Holly said, one of the second or the third step is to choose the publication venue, because that's going to guide you on where you're publishing. But so that's all I'll say for now, but my comments are very, very similar to what Holly had said, follow the manuscript guidelines, because every journal has their particular way that they want an article to look. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yield. All right, so last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Alfredo Marabia, board certified in both internal and occupational medicine. Dr. Alfredo Marabia is a professor of epidemiology at the Barry Commoner Center for Health and the Environment at Queens College, City University of New York. Dr. Marabia is the principal investigator of the World Trade Center Heart Cohort Study, serves as the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Public Health, as well as editor of the Epidemiology and History in the American Journal of Epidemiology, and was supported by the National Library of Medicine to write about the history of epidemiology. He lectures and teaches on the history of epidemiology internationally in English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. Dr. Marabia.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Courtney. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I was also looking forward of being with you somewhere in West Virginia, but this time at least we meet virtually, and we start to get used to that. But hopefully there will be another chance to meet in person. So I have a short presentation to talk to you about the journal. And incidentally, Colin said all the languages that I can speak, and you see by my accent that I'm from Queens, New York, right? It's this you notice immediately. So before I start my presentation, I want to say I totally agree with what Holly and Linda said. I mean, the system is the same for all journals. So you need to have the right approach. But I would emphasize something. The secret for publication is to submit your paper to the right venue. You see, you won't get a public health paper published in a major clinical journal, a priori, except if it has something. And you won't have a clinical paper published in AJPH, and they will probably have no exception there. So I think the first thing that an author should do is to try to know where to send the paper and to send it right. Because if you target the journal, you are likely to get reviewed and accepted. If you target it wrong, you'll be rejected offhand, you've lost time. And so, for example, AJPH publishes material that is recent. So we don't publish data that has more than 3 years since its latest collection. So currently, articles that have data that have been collected before 2017 are not considered. They are rejected offhand, whatever the topic, etc., because we publish only recent material that's relevant for policy. So that's the first thing. If your data is older, go to another journal. A lot of the submission that we reject go into JAMA and other journals because they like, also articles that are older. They stress different aspects than we do. And they reject things that we are interested in. So it's not so much the journal, but the fit. And how do you know the fit? You peruse the journal. You go to their website and you read the last year. You go to the articles that seems relevant to you, and see how they are presented, how they discuss things, and then you read the instruction for others to submit it carefully if it's a good fit. But also, editors have a very simple way to know whether you have done a careful review of the literature. I know what I publish. I know all my articles. So if I see that you write on a topic and don't cite us on this topic, I say, well, that's lousy. I mean, I'm not interested. They didn't do their work correctly. So make sure that you know what the journal you're sending it to has published. and that will, you know, we want to have continuity in what we publish. We want to publish on certain area and make sure we have all or the best or the most relevant material that comes in our journal. And so this is small trick, but fit. And for this institute, I mean, the meaning of fitness, you know, is certainly something that you all know about. So let me show you a little bit of information about the journal. I'm going to share my screen. Here. So do you see my screen? Yes? Okay, great. So I wanted to, you know, why would you send your article to AJPH? You would send it because you want to reach the public health community. That's what we do first. You know, you have here the number of reads and downloads we have every year. I came on board in 2015. Now we're in 2020. We're heading to 7 million downloads and reads. So this is essentially the public health community. Thanks to our, you know, links to the American Public Health Association, we have connection to all the public health people, from local practitioners to federal person, even in those difficult times. So the first thing is really, you send AJPH, not because you want to reach universities or scholars, not because you want to reach clinicians, but first of all, because you have something that's relevant for public health, relevant for policy. There are many different, you know, measures of the so-called impact of a journal. The one that really matters for me is the number of citation and the download. So those are the two metrics that I actually follow. And you see, we are actually at 41,000 citation of articles, journal articles. And we have a very high eigenfactor. For those who know what it means that those articles are cited by journals that have also a large impact. So this is in terms of statistics, and to insist that you send to AJPH because you want to reach the public health community. So here are some of the covers, you know, that give you an idea of what we've been publishing. Every year for National Public Health Week, we have this issue that is about the public health dialogue. And you'll find here points, counterpoints. All those are points, counterpoints, in which one of the author is a Democrat and the other is a Republican. And we try to promote this dialogue between people who are interested in public health and that have the common goal of you know, improving the public's health, and who respect science. And I think this is very unique. We keep on repeating it, and we insist that we're not a political journal. We're not a watchdog. We're a journal that publishes opinions of different origin and also the evidence that is needed to improve policy. So I recommend that you look into this. And these are the issues that we've published since COVID. The first one was in July. We noticed that the inequity in which the disease was hitting the population was really the most striking aspect. And we had this issue saying, we're not in this all together. Then we had one about public health as a common good, insisting that this epidemic shows that our access to health should be independent of our income, of our education, etc. And again, I think on this issue, there is a very, very large consensus. So I'm very happy to hear, since we have Holly and other people, that we had one issue on rural health in September, and we cited a lot of material from the Journal of Rural Health. And the guest editor was Wendy Brown, who's been state health officer in Wyoming for many years. And the other one is Paul Irvin, an associate editor who is also dean in Birmingham, Alabama. We had the supplement. We had a 15-year anniversary, so-called anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and connecting it with COVID-19. We had a supplement, and we publish lots of supplements. This is with CDC on health misinformation, on social media. This was our November issue. We had several submissions. Some of them are commissioned about how to reinvent public health at the local level, but also at the global level. And this, please keep this confidential because that's our next issue. It's going to come out next Thursday. So no one has seen that before you. And it's going to be about another issue in which there is a lot of consensus, but on which the journal hasn't covered that much. And it's reducing wasted medical expenses, spending in order to improve prevention. And this wasteful medical care spending, they are in trillions of dollars. It's a huge amount of money. So I'm really excited in publishing this. And that's it for what I wanted to show. It's a Prezi, so I have lots of presentations that are mixed in this one. But thank you, Courtney. This is what I had to present.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Moravio and Dr. Yield and Holly. That was fantastically helpful. So many great targeted tips and insights. Thank you all so much. So we have some excellent questions, and fortunately we have Dr. Mace who has joined us, and I believe she will be taking over the question and answer. Would you like to get us started, Dr. Mace?
Sure. Thank you all. Sorry, a board of governors meeting this morning made me running late, but I'm very excited about this time together to talk about this. So be sure if you have questions that you put them in the chat so I can pick them up. I've got a few here that we want to start with. So these were submitted previously, so some of you have already asked some questions. So do any of our panelists have any tips or best practices for selecting a journal?
I'll say something about that. And I think I can say this because we've got the editor of the American Journal of Public Health here. I got the fastest rejection I've ever got from the American Journal of Public Health for their rural issue. I had a thing and I thought, oh, they're doing a rural issue. I'll kind of tweak this to give it a public health spin. I submitted it. I got on an airplane to Arizona from Washington, which is about a 2.5-hour flight. I got there, I got an email that it was rejected. It was that fast, literally. So I think having the appropriate topic, and I did, like I said, try to spin it with a public health spin, clearly unsuccessfully. So I think that the tip of what does that journal talk about, and submitting and choosing your journal, based on that, and you presumably the research you're doing is something that you know about, so you probably read journals that cover it, and I would use that as your guidance. And I did not take it personally. I submitted somewhere else.
I'm very sorry, Holly. And I know before I would have checked why, but if you, and it's true that a year ago we used to reject much faster than now because we have too many submissions. Now it would have probably taken 2 or 3 days, but there must have been something in the article which was not, which flagged it as not.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I tried to.
I didn't take it. If I'm going to get rejected, I'd like to get rejected fast so I can move to the next thing. So, but that was funny when you said if it's not about public health, and I'm not really a public health person, so I did try, and I'm telling people that if you try that, it might work in some cases, but really getting the right journal by what do they talk about is really important.
And as I said before, reading this journal, go, look at the last year of publication, look at what was close to what you published, and look how they, the type of papers we publish, because a journal has a character. We cannot, we're not a repository of articles. We have an editorial policy. We want to have a profile. We want to be different from other journals. So all this matters, and it's not equivalent to send it to one or the other, and it doesn't say nothing about the quality of your paper. Because if you're rejected for lack of fit, it can be an excellent paper, but it's okay, but not the right choice.
Yeah,
So don't take the rejection personally, and rejection builds character.
Yeah, I totally agree with how you find a journal, and it may take multiple journals before someone will take something. I have an example personally of, we did this study that looked at the how much plagiarism there was in the personal statements of medical school applicants. And so we thought, oh, that would be great for academic medicine journals, rejected from all of the main ones. And it was just, no major critique. It's just everything can't get published. And then I did, like I said, like our two other panelists said, you see what other journals publish. And so there's a journal called Journal of General Internal Medicine. And I noticed that they had published an article about plagiarism in the personal statements of resident applicants. So then I thought, hey, I mean, that is more of a clinical journal, but it thought that it had that twist where they thought general physicians, internists would be interested in that topic. And then that's where it ended up getting accepted. But so, yeah, you have to look at the journal and see what else they accept. And I would have never thought that journal, but I looked to see what references I had used for our article, and then saw, where did they accept those papers? Where were those accepted? So that journal actually, then seemed favorable for that type of material.
Oh, that's a good idea. Thank you for that. Okay. So another question, what ethical considerations are there in the research or publishing articles that are important for your journals? And you all may have talked a little bit about ethics while I was out.
Certainly getting anything, having it go through an institutional review board, depending on who the subjects are. And I'm not sure if you would engage in case reports, but getting patient permission and hiding any obvious identifying factors. Again, the protection of human subjects has to be paramount.
Yeah, I would say conflict of interest. I mean, it needs to be declared. They are listed in the article. If we invite guest editors, we do a special section. We have a page which also lists all the conflicts of interest. I say for us, since we have a embargo policy, we don't publish articles that have been already published online in any form, whether it's a PhD thesis, whether it's a blog or whatever. So we actually check. We have an authenticity. It's authenticate. It's called. It's like they do in school, to know whether the students have copied the work from the internet, and if the proportion of what we call self-plagiarism is too high, we just don't consider. So that's another aspect. It's often not really plagiarism because people don't realize, and they're not bad in intention, but for us it's an ethical issue. You cannot publish in a journal things that already are accessible. So both COI and originality of the submission.
Thank you. Does anybody have suggestions for writing an effective cover letter that might get somebody's attention?
Cover letter.
Yeah, when you submit your article.
Oh, got it. I don't know if my colleagues want to say, for me, the cover letter is crucial. I mean, it makes a whole of a difference, and we have instructions, 3 questions needs to be addressed. I want to know how important it is for public health, our original, and a 1-sentence summary. Since half of the people who are doing it, now it's part of the submission. You have to do that, but this makes a huge difference, huge difference. And again, I mean, if you send it a cover letter saying, dear editor of the Journal of Rural Health, and it's sent to AJPH, you know, it doesn't look good because, I mean, it's not so much our ego, but it means that you've been a little bit sloppy, you know, in the way you, so the cover letter is very important. Often we're not sure about the abstract. We go to the cover letter and we can be convinced there. So don't under-evaluate the cover letter.
Anybody
Sometime-
else?
I was going to say, sometime in the manuscript guidelines, it does have certain features you have to put in that cover letter. So be sure to have those. Like I said, that we now have, you have to have a plagiarism statement in there, but some want you to list in there specifically that there's no conflicts of interest, depending on the journal. Again, follow the manuscript guidelines. But I think stressing in there the again, the uniqueness of what you've done, to point it out maybe right there for the editor to appreciate it if it's not obvious.
Yeah, why it's important. Tell them, you know, this is why this work is important.
Do you have any suggestions specific to publishing qualitative research?
I definitely have, in the context of the Journal of Rural Health, the Journal of Rural Health does publish qualitative research, but it needs to be rigorous. So you need to know what you're doing or consult with somebody and use some appropriate methods and be able to describe them. And so qualitative research is definitely part of the Journal of Rural Health. I would not say it's a major focus, but it definitely needs to be rigorous.
Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, same for us. The thing is that qualitative research can be of a lot of different aspects. I mean, we're interested again in intervention and policy. So we don't publish epidemiologic articles about association. We don't publish qualitative research that, you know, generates ideas or hints on how the right intervention or etc. would be conducted. I mean, and so we have an editor who is an expert in qualitative research, and we only publish qualitative research when it is integrated into some intervention. And so the connection between the two is very important. We wouldn't publish an article that has a focus group and a lot of citation about what people said and what people, etc., because this is not for us. It doesn't mean we don't think it's important, all the opposite. You know, often those populations are very rare, difficult to reach, etc., but it's not for us. Now, if you're doing intersectionality type of research and you have intervention, but you have also mixed collection of data, some qualitative, some quantitative, etc., that becomes of interest for us.
Thank you. So here's a question for the PBRN administration. What restrictions, if any, are there on non-West Virginia researchers submitting projects for a PBRN endorsement and affiliation? I don't know if Dr. Lewis or Jen or Stacy want to take that.
I'm going to ask Stacy to take that because we collaborate across state lines, so Stacy or Bill, you look like you're ready to comment.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I don't think there's any reason we can't. It's how they want to access the network and what benefit will it provide our membership and what can we assist and grow the general knowledge? So yeah, we've worked with a lot of out-of-state organizations on this. So.
Okay. All right. Stacy, did you want to make any?
Sure. I was just going to say basically the same, but you know, what we've done for those of you that might be kind of new to the PBRN process, we have in place a protocol review committee that Jen had mentioned in the previous session. And so what that really does is give us feedback on any project that comes through. And so we don't change that process at all from, you know, whether it's in state or in something from one of our institutions versus anything out of state. It goes through that same process. And so we get the feedback from those protocol review committee members and give it back to the researcher that has submitted the project. So we really get that feedback from West Virginia, whether that is going to directly, you know, a West Virginia project or not. We've got that feedback that we've been able to provide. So that process will be for any project coming through.
Okay, how useful is a tool such as Jane in journal selection?
I'm not familiar with that tool, so I can't comment on that.
I
Who
wrote
asked the question? Let's
I don't
see.
know.
Bill?
Never
Who
heard
asked
of
that?
Yeah, it was me. It's one of the online tools where you can submit your abstract and then it reviews it and gives suggested journals as a potential place. Just trying to start out with publications. I was curious if any of you all had any experience with it or any online tools
Hey,
like that.
I never heard of it. Thank you. I don't,
No.
I'll play with it for sure.
What we do when an article is relevant for us, I mean, when it's not relevant, when it's a study about rats or other animals, etc., which is really or totally a lab study, we just don't, we just reject. But if it's relevant and it's just not the exact fit, or we send in our decision letter a list of journals. So one thing, it can be 10, 20, we have different combination according to the topic. So I think this is useful, but one thing one should be very, very careful about, and I don't know if Jane is protected for this thing, is that there are a lot of predatory journals around. And these are not serious journals. They publish anything for a fee, and they've been proliferating over the last years. So if you get a list from one of these software, you need to make sure that before submitting, you go to the website of the journal and make sure that it's not predatory, but it belongs to, it's independent like AJPH, or it belongs to a serious publishing group.
Courtney asked a really interesting question. So she says, like many of us, our work research currently focuses primarily on two main epidemics, COVID and substance use. Given the exhaustive literature and competition, plus the ongoing and sustaining need for the foreseeable future, any specific directions or approaches in these two areas for making our manuscripts more attractive and appealing to your outlets? Great question, Courtney.
That is a good question. I publish a lot on substance use, and I think and I review tons of manuscripts in that arena. And you're absolutely right. There are so many good, interesting papers out there. And so I would say if you can emphasize, first off, conduct a rigorous, experiment or study. And then if you can try and say what is new about your study, what does your study contribute that we don't already know, or how does it extend on what we know? So you can get a nice little pipeline of studies going. You can do a study, and then of course the natural thing when you do a study is that makes you ask the next question, like, well, what about, the A is true, but that makes me wonder about B, and then you do a study that addresses B. And you can say when you submit it, this takes us further, our knowledge further. And then there's of course lots of journals, so you might have to try more than one. The Journal of Rural Health, you definitely got to have the rural piece and the rigor piece, I would say.
Okay, has there been any increase in manuscript submissions since the start of the pandemic? And has it changed your acceptance rates any? One's asking.
I can tell you that we used to get 3,500 submissions a year. And this year we had 3,500 in the first 6 months. I mean, we're heading towards 6,000 or 7,000 submissions this year. It's absolutely overwhelming. Every day I have 20 to 30 new papers that are submitted, so it's huge. The quality is not proportional. So our acceptance rate has dropped by 50%. It's because we get a lot of half-baked articles, and also, again, the key question is this for a JPH? We said it, we wrote that we are interested in providing the evidence and the opinions and the public health practice that is needed to rebuild public health after this crisis. And so that's what we're interested in. So if you send us, articles about 200 or 3,000 COVID patients, we're not interested in it. If you use the current data about COVID incidence or mortality, which is all biased and misclassified and means nothing, because we're not interested, and we receive thousands of those articles. So yes, a huge increase in submission.
How about the other two journals? Are you all seeing the same thing?
Well, I'll go next. So the West Virginia Medical Journal was in a transition time probably for the last year. And so it sort of needed to be built back up again. So, it's been artificial because, for the last year or so, there was just like a transition going on. And so when I took over in July, as I said, there was this big backlog of articles from, a couple years back, actually. So it's artificial. So hopefully to improve the reputation of it and that authors feel comfortable submitting again. So, our regional state journal is probably different from, these broader national journals. So it's, coming back from making the journal, getting it back up to speed. So, we haven't had that experience, although I have nothing to compare it to since I only began in July, but no, we haven't had 3,500 submitted anywhere near that. So.
Yeah, and Linda, I know you have to leave right here in a few minutes, but we thank you so much for being with us, and we'll
Okay.
we're going to be continuing on, but I just wanted to acknowledge you.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, I do have to go. I'm glad you pointed it out. I have to do some interviews. Bye, everyone. Best wishes. Stay in touch.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
And Holly, did you have anything to add to that question about the numbers of articles you guys are seeing?
Well, I can't I just was, while Linda was speaking, I was just quickly looking through to see if I had the data in front of me, and the number of submissions generally has been going up in the Journal of Rural Health, and the acceptance rate there is 17%. So you got a less than 1 in 5 chance. And I didn't really want to say that because to me, that's kind of sounds like a discouraging number for people if you've never published before. But I would really encourage you to give it a try.
Okay. I have a few more questions. I know at 1 o'clock we're going to go to sort of an echo feel to the thing, but this one really interests me. Do you see any common mistakes or trends from submitted manuscripts that you can help us avoid?
Well, the biostatistician in me says, oh, sorry, Alfred.
No, Holly, it's yours. It's yours. Please.
I would recommend you know, I would highly recommend, I'm sure you've been told this, talk to a statistician at the beginning of your study, not at the end when you have your data and they say, oh, I wish you would have collected and kept this piece of information. I think that a lack of rigor is a problem. And so I would just strongly encourage you to reach out to somebody and say, you know, this is my plan. Do you see any holes in it? And then they can help you avoid those pitfalls that then it's hard to make something out of when there's some key pieces missing. One of the things that the Washington Practice-Based Research Network does that I think is really neat is they work with the people at the clinics. They have a team, sort of like your team, that kind of coaches them along, and they are, we call them practice champions, and they participate in the research and kind of get introduced to doing a paper, sort of, I'll say in baby steps. They kind of help in different parts, and then they learn the process. And I think that's been really successful for them. I don't know if you have a similar thing to that.
Yeah, I would give you my most important advice. Most important is that you should, if the paper matters for you, if the paper matters, because if you have a small paper, you don't care, you're going to send it. But if it matters and where it's going to be published matters, select the journal very carefully. You know, write your paper for this journal by reading other articles. Prepare a cover letter that corresponds. Read the instruction for authors. Make sure you send this article to the journal specifically. I read 30 papers a day. I know when an article is submitted for us or not. I know immediately. I know by the title, by the way the thing is written, the cover letter, I know. So if I see that an article has been prepared for us, and if you've done all this work, it's probably a good fit. This makes it easier for the editors to select it. So be careful, choose your journal and write an article for that journal. And if it's rejected, restart again for another journal. Just don't take the article, put it in another envelope, I would say, but now, you know, just don't send articles like this, because you're going to get rejected only because you're not a good fit. And that's very sad. That was my final advice.
Oops, you're muted, Dr. Mace.
I'm muted?
Oh,
No, Dr. Mace, no,
I
you,
was-
no,
I
Dr.
was
Mace was, no,
Yeah.
that was excellent.
And
You were
those in
not
West
muted.
Virginia who know me know I am rarely muted. So I was just saying how I love this. I just really love this. Is such a good format to learn, and it's really so helpful to us. So I'm gonna ask one last question, and then we'll go into the final session here. But what's the most important section of the manuscript? Like if you were going to really hone in and focus on one piece that you really are going to look at, what would it be?
Holly?
Well, for me, that's a toss-up between the methods, and that's the biostatistician in me. I want to see what they did, but I want to know at the end, do the conclusions that they draw, are they supported by the data? I think that would be the most important piece. Does what you say, you know, the outcome of your study, is it supported by your data? That would be probably my take on that.
I would say it depends on the stage. First of all, you have to pass the triage. And so the triage, I read the title first. Title makes sense or not. If it doesn't make sense, I already start to be worried about the article and kind of don't want to continue. Then I read the abstract. And if the abstract is clear, you know, that adds, I read the cover letter, and then I go to the tables and figures, because I don't have time to read in detail all the content. And if I'm interested, then I go to the method section and the results. But it's a progress. If I'm stopped at the title, I can be stopped. You know, there's another deputy editor who reads also the article, and we discuss every decision together. But so it's the triage is the title, the abstract, the cover letter, tables, and figure. And if you pass that, then the rest is important too.
Thank you so much for that. Well, Stacy, I'm going to turn it over to you, I guess, to move us into the final section.
Actually, I'll take it from here, Dr.
Oh,
Mays.
okay.
Thank you very much to you and Courtney for facilitating. And thank you so much to the panelists. It's just been so rich to get your insight and feedback, and really exciting to have this for our network.
Well,
Really.
I'm gonna be watching for your papers coming through and cheering you guys on. So good luck with that, and thanks for asking me to come.
Beautiful. And so we had one person who had requested a session after this collective session. And so we'll stay on, and we thank everyone else for joining us today for this virtual retreat. And at some point, we'll see you all in person, hopefully on a boat.
I hope so.
And take good care.